Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Angie Frantz. I am the Expressions and Celebrations Product Manager with Prestige Senior Living. We're grateful to have you joining us today. We are always grateful and blessed when we have David Troxel joining us to share all the important things that he is learning about our memory care needs throughout our nation, throughout the world. David and I just attended the Alzheimer's Disease International Conference in London, and it was such a privilege to be on the front lines, hearing from people from all around the world, things that they are facing as they are diagnosed or have family members or loved ones that are diagnosed with dementia or Alzheimer's. And we are really interested in learning about what the future holds for dementia care. And one of those things that we always like to do is keep you up to date and provide these webinars from Prestige Senior Living. And David, we are just really happy to have you with us today. Look forward to what you have to share with us. You've been a great partner with Prestige for many years now, I believe since 2008 or 2009. You've really joined with us in really building our Expressions product for our memory care neighborhoods throughout the West Coast. And your expertise, your gentle heart towards those that have been diagnosed with dementia or Alzheimer's has been such a privilege for us to work with. And so thanks for being with us today.
Well, thank you very much, Angie. It was great. We had a little bit of fun in London, I must confess, but I know you had afternoon tea one day, which is very traditional, and we all went to see My Fair Lady, so it was really quite a charming week. But as Angie said, we actually did do work. We did do work. We had about 2.5, 3 days of this really terrific Alzheimer's conference. There were about 500 people from all over the world at the conference, another 500 attending virtually. And it was very exciting to just sort of see new trends and ideas, but also get some validation that the ideas that we're practicing in the Pacific Northwest of the US are really ideas that I think are intrigued, that the world's intrigued by this idea of socialization, engagement. Angie, you might even say, if we have time, share that you presented an excellent poster about a great form that you send out when someone goes to the emergency room, where we give a lot of social information, not just the meds and all of that, so that if one of the residents with memory loss goes to an ER, there's kind of a whole kind of getting to know you form so that the staff can better relate to them. So a lot of innovations, and it's great to be with you here today. Angie, you want me to kick off the slide presentation then? We'll get going here, and hopefully you all can see everything here. Oops. So again, it's great to be with you here today on this. It's a very hot day here in Sacramento, California, where I'm located. Hopefully it's a little bit cooler in the Northwest, bringing out the best in persons with dementia. Again, myself and Angie. I think many of you know me by now because you probably attended many of these workshops, but I am the co-creator of the Best Friends Approach to Dementia Care, along with Virginia Bell, my longtime writing partner and friend who's turning 100 years old June 30th, very exciting. I work as an author and educator program consultant. About half my career is with the Alzheimer's Association. And of course, I've been a family member for my mother, Dorothy, who passed away in 2008. And honored to have this really long-lasting relationship with Prestige Senior Living. And I've been so excited to see you develop this outstanding memory care program, Angie. Angie, I plugged a slide in there. I think you already introduced yourself a little bit, but if you'd like to say a few more words about yourself, please do.
Certainly. Thank you, David. Yes, I began my career with Prestige. It'll be 12 years ago in October coming up. And, I just thought it was a stepping stone in my life as I changed careers from being a home ec teacher. But I found myself really finding a passion for people with dementia and Alzheimer's. And my own mother-in-law had been diagnosed, and we were taking care of her in her own home. And I was doing that in the evenings and working for Prestige. And she eventually moved into one of our communities, which was a great blessing. I knew she was going to really have her life enhanced by our Expressions memory care program and product. And so being with Prestige, I've been an executive director in our communities. I've also, did things like life enrichment and all that. But I currently am the product manager for our Expressions memory care, as well as our Celebrations assisted living product. We look at the future of wellness in our communities, and wellness needs to be, with our mind, body, and spirit, not only in our assisted livings, our independent livings, but also our memory care. And while there is currently no cure for Alzheimer's or dementia, we can certainly make life better. And we try to do that by bringing joy every day and getting to know our residents in really unique ways. And we'll go over a little bit of that as we go along in the webinar to kind of show you some of those ways that we really engage with our residents and get to know all about them. So thanks, David.
Thank you, Angie. So today we will review some best practices related to dementia care. We'll talk about how to keep the person physically healthy. And of course, Angie will talk about an area that's very near and dear to our hearts about how to keep the person engaged and how to have them be really operating at their very best. And we'll talk a bit about just the life of a caregiver. What are some ideas about kind of bringing out the best in you as well as the person with dementia? We'll share a few resources, and I think hopefully we'll have some time for discussion and questions. There's always so much we want to pack into these webinars.
And David, I do want to mention that folks can put a question in the chat that we can address at the end of the webinar or in the Q&A as well.
Thank you, Angie. I appreciate that very much. So today, again, we'll cover this territory here. And so we'll plunge in and talk a bit about some best practices. And in the spirit of our London trip, I have the classic keep calm and carry on, but here we have keep calm and let's learn together. Recognize that current medicines only have a limited impact on the person's cognition and well-being. I'm sure many of you are very familiar with Aricept, Exelon, Razodine, Namenda. These are the 4 classic memory drugs. Usually the physician will start someone off on one of the what's called cholinesterase inhibitors, the Aricept, Exelon, and Razodine, which are these medicines that seem to kind of give a boost to the neurotransmitters in the brain. Then they'll often add Namenda as sort of a secondary drug, maybe 6 months or a year in, and that combo therapy seems to work best. The challenge is by everything we can figure out, these 4 medicines may help some people do a bit better for a little bit longer, but they're not really stopping the underlying progress of Alzheimer's or the dementia. They're not really what we call disease modifying. And so those medicines really are kind of like a Band-Aid. The good news is that they're very easily tolerated by most people, very few side effects. So I do recommend you give them a try. My own mother was on Aricept and my father felt it was helping her. I think he left her on for 3 or 4 years. But the research suggests that probably after 12, 14, 16 months, you probably have gotten your maximum benefit. Now, I'm sure all of you are aware of this drug that's had a lot of controversy that was approved last year, Aduhelm or aducanumab. And basically, this drug does appear to have some disease-modifying properties. It was quite, we had some high hopes for it. It's a drug that went through a lot of controversial ups and downs. But in the end, it was not supported by the research community, by the medical community, who just felt it really did not work well or work well enough. And of course, Biogen, the company that sponsored it, kind of shot themselves in the foot a little bit when they initially charged $56,000 a year, prompting an increase in Medicare premiums, which was kind of a big fiasco. But in fact, even though they cut the price in half, even though it certainly seems possible that this medicine might be something that helps some people in very early stages, we need to do better, and we will do better. I think this was a kind of a first horse out of the gate in 20 years of a new medicine, and I'm very encouraged that hopefully there'll be some better medicines coming about soon. Angie, you didn't mention it, but the other big news for this summer is I think it's July, we have the Alzheimer's Association International Conference, the AAIC, which is the big annual research conference. That will be in San Diego. And that tends to be the time where we have a lot of announcements about any potential breakthroughs. So fingers crossed, we might be hearing some better news about Alzheimer's and dementia in about 30 days. So if so, we'll have to put together another quick webinar. So again, medicines are only limited in what they can do. The treatment, therefore, for Alzheimer's disease and other dementias in many ways is socialization and engagement, okay? It's really about you and me. It's about helping the person live the best life they can live, about being effective as a caregiver. So these are all some of these sort of key concepts, best practices. There really is, Angie and I will kind of argue today, a right way and a wrong way to be an effective care partner. That doesn't mean that you have to do it all our way. There's lots of avenues, But we do know that there are some things that seem to work well and some things that don't in terms of helping this person do as well as they can. And I'm very pleased to say that Prestige and its Expressions Memory Care program do embrace these best practices. So again, a few tips here in this sort of short webinar today about, just physical health. Be sure to keep the person hydrated, particularly during the summer weather. Older people still need a lot of fluids and water, and they can get very easily dehydrated. And when you get dehydrated, it can really cause a lot of behaviors. You don't even know quite what's happening. So just be aware that that's important. Watch for sudden changes. My mother's neurologist, Dr. Bob Harbaugh in Santa Barbara, was so gifted in his language. And he once said to me that my mother's Alzheimer's was like a slow and lazy river, Most of these dementias, even though people have good days and bad days, they are progressive. There is deterioration, but they're slow. So if you have a family member who's been doing pretty well and then kind of boom, one day they're not doing well, or if you work at Prestige, you have a resident who suddenly one day has really odd behaviors. It can be, again, pain, depression. They could be sick. It could be urinary tract infection, but watch out for those sudden changes. Keep an eye out for pain and depression. I'll talk about pain in just a moment and introduce you to kind of a new tool. But depression particularly is something that's important to talk about. The Alzheimer's Association estimates that about 40% of people with Alzheimer's will experience depression during the course of their illness. And when you're depressed, it kind of drags you down physically and cognitively, emotionally. So you want to get on top of depression. You want to treat it with either the antidepressant medications or, of course, hopefully engagement, music therapy, pet therapy, time in the sunshine, productive chores, all of those things to be very helpful. And of course, get plenty of sleep. Maybe easier said than done if you're a caregiver, but that can be very, very important for you and the person with dementia, okay? One more slide about kind of physical health. And this has been something, Angie, that's been on my mind for a while. Maybe you could comment on it if you have a comment. But, I do think it's very, very important to look at the medicines or pills your family member is taking and look at it pretty regularly. There's still a sense that, older people often get a lot of medications, over-the-counter medications. It's not uncommon to have someone on 10, 12, 15 medications. And this might be all well and good if you have an excellent doctor and pharmacist and you're really on top of these things. But you see, the problem with Alzheimer's and dementia is that aspiration pneumonia remains a major concern. And in fact, Dr. Jeff Cummings, formerly of UCLA, now the Mayo Clinic in Las Vegas, the Cleveland Clinic in Las Vegas, I heard him speak a couple of years ago, and he said aspiration pneumonia is actually the #1 cause of death in people with Alzheimer's disease, the swallowing reflex. Again, that kind of breakdown of brain and body happens. So that swallowing reflex can be very, very complicated. So you don't want someone taking pills they don't need to take. So we recommend that you recognize the person's living alone, aren't able to manage their own medications, give extra monitoring there. If you are involved in care, strive to reduce medication use to the essentials. Talk to your pharmacist, talk to your doctor. Does mother, particularly mom, if she has advancing dementia, does she need to be on all these cholesterol medicines or certain medicines? We don't want her to be taken off something really important, but be an advocate. And of course, think about this concept of something called polypharmacy, particularly when someone's living by themselves or has not a very good network. What happens is they might see multiple doctors for the same problems, and they might have multiple doctors prescribing multiple meds for the same problems. So that can be an issue. And of course, Prestige supports my own view that these psychotropic mood-altering drugs, you want to be very judicious because they have side effects. When you have someone on a mood-altering medicine, something like Seroquel, it can, an atypical antipsychotic, it can cause falls and other things as well. Angie, I'll just go off sharing for a second. Do you have any thoughts about the medicine piece? Is there any program, maybe I'm not aware of at Prestige, to look at people's medications with the pharmacist?
Well, our health services directors in each of our communities, they work very closely with the pharmacies, with the physicians. It's not uncommon, as you talked about, polypharmacy and, supplements and things like that. When a resident moves in with us, I remember a dear lady who moved in and she had difficulty swallowing. And I was a med tech at the time, and she had 30 different medications she took every morning, every afternoon, and they were crushed. And so we would mix them in with a pudding or a jelly or an applesauce, the way that she liked to take her meds. But it was very difficult. And so we really had those conversations with the pharmacy and her physician and really advocated for her and what was best for her. And so they cut those down to over half. And it made it so much more pleasant for her to take those really needed medications that were really having an effect on her body and her mind. And it was very freeing for her. And so it was very freeing for us as well. And it didn't take her as long to take those meds every day. And we didn't see a change, in her condition or anything. So it's really good to have those conversations.
That's great. And for those of you who are professionals on the webinar today, I have found that families are so appreciative when you talk to them about this subject matter. I've never met a family who wants mom and dad on more pills, So if you can actually work with them to reduce those pills, that can be very, very powerful.
Absolutely.
Okay, so moving on. I want to talk now about pain, because what we've discovered is, sadly, there's actually research on this, that pain often goes really unreported or underreported in people living with dementia. I've used this example, I think, at some of our previous webinars, but imagine you have a terrible toothache. You wake up in the morning or even in the middle of the night with a tooth that's kind of blowing up on you. There's an infection. Well, most of us, of course, will know that we can call our dentist, call an emergency dental number, go to an emergency dentist, really get it taken care of. But a person, when they have cognitive loss, they may not be able to connect the dots. They may not be able to say, gosh, my tooth hurts, I need to go to a dentist. Instead, they just live in this experience of pain, which means they're kind of shutting down emotionally. They may not be eating, their behavior changes, their personality changes. That's when maybe someone slaps you, when they're pacing, when they're agitated. So we want to always be careful with pain. And of course, if someone's in pain and we give them a psychotropic medication because they're agitated and we haven't treated the underlying pain, well, that is really a shame, because that can kind of lead to a cavalcade of losses. So I want to introduce to you something called the Pain AD Scale. It's in the public domain. You can Google it and print your own copy. And it's a very simple tool, a 10-point test that really a family member can do, a professional can do, a CNA can do, a nurse can do, that helps us identify whether someone's actually in pain. So basically, you take a look at them and you look at 5 different kind of categories of behavior. Their breathing, is the breathing normal? Negative vocalizations, are they moaning or groaning, or do you hear kind of something coming that suggests they're in pain? Facial expressions, are they grimacing, gritting their teeth? Body language, are their shoulders tight, or their fists clenched? And then something, kind of a fancy word, consolability. If you have a child who's upset and you hug them, the cries usually stop. With an older adult, if they're just beside themselves, if they're upset, they're agitated, and we try to console them with our words, with a hug, with touch, with chocolate, and they're easily consoled, and that probably means they don't have a chronic pain situation or severe pain situation. But if they only cheer up for a minute or two and then they go right back into it after you've given them some ice cream, that suggests there's a problem. So let me introduce this scale to you. I'm sorry, it's kind of a lot on one slide here, but I think I can explain it pretty simply. So again, you have those 5 categories on the left. Breathing, and we have 3 choices there. Normal, occasional labored breathing, short periods of hyperventilation, or noisy, labored, long periods of hyperventilation. Okay, so you choose one of those and you put a circle around it. Negative vocalizations, normal, occasional moan or groan or low-level speech with negative quality, or repeated, troubled, calling out, loud, moaning, groaning, crying. So maybe someone is yelling, help me, help me, help me, which sometimes you hear in a nursing home or even at home. Facial expressions, smiling or maybe no expression, well, that's a 0, all's well. Sad, frightened, frowned, 1 point, facial grimacing 2. Body language, relaxed, tense, distressed, pacing, fidgeting, or rigid, fists clenched, knees pulled up, pulling, pushing away, striking out, kind of a dramatic difference from 0, 1, and 2 there. And finally, again, this consolability, no need to console. They are sort of distracted a bit for a while with you reaching out to them, your voice, your touch, or number 3, unable to make it happen at all. And you can see the scale below. If there's 0, there's no pain, 1 to 3 mild, 4 to 6 moderate, and 7 to 10 severe. So one more slide here just to kind of, again, show you how this works. I maybe will sit and observe someone who's in memory care, or maybe if it's my brother or my wife or my partner or a friend who I'm taking care of, and they're having a sudden change of behavior, they're having some challenges, again, you can go to Google, download Pain Aid scale, and I can score it. So here I've scored it as a 2, 1, 2, 1, 1, 1, and that adds up to 7. And so this is someone who's maybe in the beginning of severe discomfort or pain. Now, admittedly, this tool is not perfect. I think it's just sort of a guideline, but I like it because I think with these behaviors, it's so important to kind of stop, look, and listen and see what's going on. And this can be very, very helpful for you. So with that, and I'd be happy to take some questions about Pain Aid at the end of the webinar. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Angie. Angie, do you want me to do your slides for you, or do you want me to give them back to you?
Sure, you can go ahead since you have it already up. That'd be great. Thanks, David.
Okay. What next?
Okay. So with Prestige, one of the things that we worked on years ago, back in 2008, 2009, and then rolled out to our communities or neighborhoods within our communities is life story work. And we found out that knowing a person's life story, and for those of you that are home caregivers, this is something that I really encourage you to work on through daily conversations with your loved ones as you're visiting families during holidays, family events. We just had Father's Day and graduation. Having family members engage in discussion and asking some of these questions and journaling that. We find that journaling is so important as your loved one ages in life. And so learning more about their history, things like that is just such an important part of what we do. And so we have a brochure that we hand out. We also have it digitally available, My Life Story. And life story work looks at so many different aspects of a person's history. And so you look at the slide here, it says summertime is a good time to consider writing a mini memoir or top 10 cards. David has that as far as looking and having those conversations. This can remind family members and staff working with you of the person's likes, dislikes, rituals, traditions, and achievement. And, our life story portfolios that we ask families and loved ones and even guardians to fill out talks about where a resident was born. How did they grow up? Were they in a rural setting? Were they in a city setting? Did they grow up on a farm, and maybe feed the chickens every day or rise at 5 a.m.? Did they go out and milk the cows? All of those kinds of things add into who that person is and how they get up in the morning, how they retire at night. We want to be aware of those things. What was their schooling like? Did they graduate through high school? Did they go on to college? Did they marry? Do they have children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren? Did they participate in any kind of military service? What are their religious rituals or beliefs or traditions? Or maybe they don't have any, maybe something else feeds their spirituality. And then also looking at different aspects of the day. When they rise in the morning, how do they like to have their breakfast? Do they like a warm cup of coffee, or do they prefer a juice with their breakfast? Or maybe they have a certain favorite food or something like that. And so we really utilize life story to hone in, and then we use that to design activities centered around that resident. Some of our residents come to us and they can be distressed about the loss of a spouse or not seeing their children on a regular basis, or maybe they've gone through trauma in their life at some point in time. Maybe they are an amputee, or they've suffered from cancer, or maybe some kind of abuse, or going through wartime can be also very traumatizing. And so understanding those kinds of things. I have a really great, wonderful thing. One of our care staff, one day we were eating lunch and we had a gentleman, his name was Leonard, and she noticed with him that every day at lunchtime or dinner, he would start to have different types of behaviors, but it wasn't every day. And she wasn't quite sure why certain times were challenging for him. And so she got to reading his life story. And she found out that he had spent a lot of time in the war, and he told us that. But there was a 3-month period during his wartime service where he was in the jungles, and he only survived on rice. And she put two and two together in her mind just from that life story tidbit, and found that anytime Leonard was fed rice for lunch or for dinner, and we, that's a wonderful carbohydrate that many of our residents do enjoy, it would cause him some PTSD reactions. And for her to put that together, she shared that with our staff. We all worked on it. We changed up his service plan of what his needs were. We talked with our kitchen staff and found that if we could get another carbohydrate on his plate, like, some potatoes or a roll or something like that, and not have him eating rice, those challenging behaviors went away. And it was such a comforting and freeing thing for Leonard. It was also helpful to our staff who were having to, constantly be near him and manage those behaviors. But it was so freeing for everyone. You saw a joy and light come to his life every day for lunch and dinner when he did not have rice. It was something that we continued to document on, so all of our staff knew about it. And so it was such an important part of life story work. And we're so grateful for the importance of what we learned from that. It also helps us with activities. Maybe someone was a pilot or a physician in their life, and we can provide things like engagement through airline magazines for that pilot, or using Linked Senior that we utilize for technology to help a pilot look at flying a plane. Or maybe that physician likes to do rounds with one of our nurses, and we can put a stethoscope around her neck and give her a clipboard with a chart on it and allow her to walk around with our nurse to feel very important and still fulfilled in life. So I can't say enough about life story. And so think about in your own life, in your own home, and journaling that information to get a head start on that. Even if your family member would never move into assisted living or memory care community, but if they do, before an emergency happens, we want to have that information because it's so vital. Thanks, David. Next slide. And do you have anything to share about that, David?
Sure, Angie. I think this is just a couple of quick case studies, which are fun for us at Prestige, and certainly something you can copy in whatever care setting you're at. But, how do you really fully use this life story? Well, again, your family member very well, but let's say you have an in-home caregiver, or you go to a day center, or you have a new building you're going to. You want the staff to know a lot about them. So let's say mother was a nurse. Well, she might enjoy, like Angie mentioned earlier, that clipboard, talking about her nursing career, being put in charge of something, ask her opinions about health, all of that. As a friend of mine once said, once a nurse, always a nurse. So the nurses that we have, I think to even maybe address them, Nurse Marion or something like that, that really makes them happy to feel the sense of productivity and purpose. And we once had a resident who was a retired hotel manager. Now, again, think about what a hotel manager does. They greet guests, they approve menus, they're in charge of catering, they make the rounds, they maybe tighten the bellhop's tie and all of that. So we actually would call this man, General Manager George, or General Manager. And, again, maybe give him a clipboard, make rounds with him, ask for his advice on menus. And you do things like this, and you ask for maybe him to share, did you ever have a time when a very important guest showed up and you were sold out? How did you handle that, right? And so, again, doing these kinds of things with playful conversation, with reminding them about their past, I think helps them feel trust and connection. It helps us bring up a favorite subject. If someone wants to leave, we can, get them away from the door with more skill if we know their life story. So be sure, bottom line, that you have this little top 10 card down at your social history, that anybody caring for your family member knows a lot about them and uses it throughout the day. Thank you, Angie. I'll advance the next slide for you.
Yeah, and then the communication from the heart. The language centers of the brain are damaged. And, we've seen studies, and you may have seen pictures of the human brain, and our human natural brain weighs about 3 pounds. And as people, their cognitive abilities decline, and we see dementia and the atrophy that takes over of the brain, it can really atrophy down to about the size of half, so about 1.5 pounds. So when you think about having half of a brain, the extra space that's inside the skull, you think also how it changes perception of things around you. We at Prestige know about the perception of color is different. Many of our dining plates are like fiesta ware, brightly colored plates, so it makes food more appetizing. There's a language that can change. Some of our residents actually, if they grew up with speaking another language, will go back to that language of origin. So maybe they spoke Spanish or German when they were younger, but today they speak perfect English. They may go back to that language of origin. There are things that slow down, as far as your gait, the way you walk, and things like that. But we can still highlight ways that we can accomplish or accommodate their needs. Maybe a resident needs to have a walker to assist them, or a cane, or even a wheelchair, but we really work with that. But we can also find other ways to communicate with the resident. Maybe they are hard of hearing, because we know that dementia and cognitive decline can affect the way that a person hears. So we may have to speak louder, we may have to speak lower, we may have to speak in a different range, a higher pitch, a lower pitch. We look at those types of things when we engage with a resident. Maybe we need to write on a whiteboard. We think about hearing aids, and a lot of our residents do have hearing aids, but at some point they don't always work. And sometimes that sound, that echo, can also cause disturbances and challenging behaviors. And so we want to work with them to communicate and, get down close to them, look them in the eye, speak clearly in front of them, or like I said, write on a whiteboard. Maybe there's new things that are coming on the market with speakers that can go around the neck to increase sound, so you can hear better through those. We communicate through showing different things with our hands, our faces. We've come from the last 2.5 years of having to wear a mask or a face shield, all of those kinds of things. So learning to smile with our eyes and communicate joy with our eyes is so important. And we want to always ask for a resident their thoughts on different ideas, different functions, different ways that we can help them. When you're addressing them and asking them a question, not to ask an open-ended question, but something that's very simple, allowing them to have choice, to be able to say, would you like to wear this purple blouse, or would you like to wear the pink blouse today? Keeping things very simple. But don't let the questions cloud them. Give them time to answer. Try not to answer for them every time. We kind of tend to want to present the answer before we wait for theirs, but give them time to explain what they're feeling, what they're thinking. And so communicating from the heart that's what we do. Communicating in joy and communicating from a positive viewpoint as well. Next slide, David. And then creating a therapeutic and healing environment. Prestige, we have 5 areas of engagement in our expressions product and programming. And one of those areas are healthy, so physical activity. We really believe that's very important. Artistic ways to express ourselves as well. And then spiritual expressions. So this therapeutic healing environment can be a very spiritual aspect of that. Tasty expressions, the foods that our residents enjoy, things that bring them pleasure and joy, things they celebrate with. And then there's educational areas too, to keep the mind active. And so when I see these slides with create therapeutic healing environments, I think about our outdoor spaces within our neighborhoods, and being able to have safe and secure areas to venture about and get some walking in, to get some that morning vitamin D. As one of my residents used to call it, she'd get out and walk a circle and get her daily constitution in. And finding a place that's peaceful where they can work in the dirt, because we know that spiritual expressions aren't always related to religious traditions, but it can be just putting your hands in the dirt, working with that dirt, planting some flowers or vegetables in the garden. We know that music is very important to a healing environment as well. Having music that really creates a positivity in the area, but also at times maybe you need something with a little more beat to it to get them up dancing and physically active. But I know the Portland Memory Garden, David's very familiar with that. And he has spoken very highly about that memory care garden and how important that is for residents to go visit that as well. Next slide. So organized, creative, and productive activities. Doing something for others is very important. We look at our residents as they still have purpose in this life, and they have ways that they express themselves that may not be as they used to be, but to still have purpose and feel like you're making a difference is really important. And so many of our residents have participated in baking dog biscuits for a local animal shelter. They've also gone out to local fish banks to help bag food to hand out. So to be able to help those that are in need, reminiscing about their favorite recipes. I know many times, some of our residents get a little bit anxious for when the food's coming to the table, and you may have that in your own home. They're hungry, they're ready to eat. And so reviewing some of their favorite recipes, talking to them about those. And then we do also like to do road trips. I encourage you to get out and just drive. I know here in the Pacific Northwest, we have what's called the 5 Mile Drive that's near our Point Defiance Zoo. And I always love taking the bus out and driving the residents through that. We would see so much wildlife. We would see so much nature, so many beautiful views of different vistas of the ocean, the Puget Sound. And so having those ways to get out and enjoy the natural areas around them, and just taking a nice Sunday drive or an afternoon drive is wonderful. Some of our gentlemen, they love to fish, and being able to put a fishing pole in their hand and still being able to go fish. Those kinds of things are so important. Helping put a worm on a hook or something like that. And then productive chores. Our residents, they grew up in a time where chores are very important, and making sure that their home was well taken care of. And so allowing residents or your loved ones to still help with the dishes, to help sweep the floor, folding laundry. Warm laundry is especially soothing and wonderful. Helping fold the napkins or set the table. All of those things are great things. And for our gentlemen, I know one of my favorite activities to do with some of our gentlemen is to take pieces of PVC pipe and allow them to put those pipes together, because we have a few plumbers who really know how to put those pipes together. So doing productive chores, sanding a birdhouse even as an activity, and then being able to paint it. All those kinds of things add into how we use life story and to bring joy every day to our residents. Next slide. And then adult education. One of these slides that says it's raining cats and dogs, or an apple a day keeps the doctor away. Well, the way that Prestige does that is we have what's called our weekly sayings or our weekly quotes. And so we've had some current ones of more fun than a barrel of monkeys, or diamonds are a girl's best friend. And it's a really great way to stimulate conversation. So I would really invite you to learn some of those old sayings. And if you don't know what they mean, Google is a wonderful help. We have some, younger staff that have not always heard some of these quotes that our residents know so well. And they're fascinated by what they learn from our residents. And so, like diamonds are a girl's best friend, watching the movie with Marilyn Monroe, or and Tony Curtis, of course, and his blue eyes. Or one of our care staff brought in a bag of the ring pops from the Dollar Tree. And so she gave all of our ladies a candy ring pop to put on, and they had wonderful conversations about when they got their engagement rings or wedding rings or a class ring. And those kinds of conversations centered around these weekly quotes are so important. And we have what's called our 100 things about me that goes along with life story. And so they're little extra tidbits of detailed information. And we like to have those filled out by families when a resident moves in with us, but our staff continue to fill those out and learn new things about residents and their stories in life that maybe their families don't even know. Sometimes families will tell us, well, my mom or my dad, they don't like music too much and they don't dance. And then they find out back in the day, they were quite the dancer in high school because we play a certain song and it jogs that memory and they start dancing again. And so all of these things help us to build our activities and our engagement around that person. I talked a little bit about Leak Senior earlier. That's a technology tablet that we use to engage our residents either one-on-one or in a group setting. We can do slideshows on it about their career or their favorite hobbies. We've had a gentleman who was making beer at Red Hook Brewery, and so we would show a slideshow on Link Senior about the making of beer. But we also had some where decorating cakes in a bakery. People are fascinated just to sit and watch how that's done. We also have many games like, Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune type games. And then also classes that our residents can take. They can learn how to do macrame. They can learn about how to make sachets out of lavender they've grown in the garden. All of these things add into that whole person and how we meet their needs. And so I encourage you to be thoughtful about wherever you may be and how you can meet the needs of your loved one and keep them engaged and finding purpose in life. Next slide, David. All right, David, I'm going to hand this one over to you. You're the expert on ice cream.
Well, yes, and here we have the very famous Gunther's ice cream in Sacramento that I think has been there something like 70 or 80 years and was recently voted like the best ice cream in the West by some magazine, I guess. Anyway, just to remind you that, I think to create a little summer project for yourself can be really charming and nice for everybody. I met this wonderful family in New England a few years ago where they decided to visit every ice cream shop in their kind of Tri-County area for the summer. Once a week, they would take mother with Alzheimer's, the daughter who was the caregiver, and her daughter, and they would go to a different ice cream shop. They would take the ice cream, taste it. They kept a journal. They'd write down what flavors they had. They took a paper menu, if there was one, and paste it in the journal. They had someone take a picture of them. And by the end of the summer, they kind of published their own kind of Yelp guide or Zagat guide to the ice cream, stores of Connecticut. And it's just a charming kind of fun thing to do. But doing an outing, one tip, I know my mother, it was sometimes hard to get her in and out of the car. So I would just get her in the car and we would, go somewhere like get a burger or an ice cream and actually sit in the car and eat it. And that just kind of took a little bit of the wear and tear out. But that could be just sort of a fun little tradition again, about how you bring out the best in person with dementia. And I will say that to me, an ice cream cone is that ultimate guerrilla tactic when things aren't going well. When you give someone an ice cream cone, it's nostalgic, it reminds them of childhood. And how can you be angry and agitated if you're having ice cream? You got to attend to it, lick the ice cream. So it can be really a kind of a fun little guerrilla tactic for caregivers when all else is going wrong. And hopefully have some ice cream for yourself as well, Angie.
Thanks, David. And, I also know that some of our communities have used their ice cream, put their ice cream carts out and saying, ice cream, you scream, we all scream for ice cream, or played that John Jingle, Jacob Heimer Schmidt song that all the ice cream trucks play, and it really gets quite a reaction. So,
hey, Angie, we had a question that came in the chat room saying, I worry if I take my family member out for a drive, they may want to go back to their old house. Well, it's certainly possible. I guess one thing I would say that I've learned is try something once. See how it goes. Kind of have a plan B. Maybe someone's coming with you who can help you. But I think if you think your family member would still enjoy a drive to a Burger King or Dairy Queen or whatever, if they say they want to go to the old house, say, hey, Mom, gas is so expensive right now. How about if we do that a little later, or let's plan it next time? I don't really have time today. Sometimes you just have sort of a gentle redirection. But you could always worry about something that might happen and lose some of that opportunity for engagement or quality of life. So, use your common sense. You're not going to take mother on a 7-hour drive somewhere if she has dementia. But I think to take a quick trip somewhere, see how it goes, I'd recommend that.
Thank you. I agree. And then we look at music. We really like to find out our residents their favorite kinds of music. And I think it's a really wonderful learning experience for us as we see the different types of music that have been popular throughout the years. And, we've done everything from big band and Frank Sinatra to now we're seeing more like Elvis and Beatles and things like that. Even I had a discussion today about one of our residents who absolutely loves Janis Joplin. I've had a resident who was, did not like to take showers. And we found out that playing some Michael Jackson music got her up grooving and dancing. And we always had have our showers prepared ahead of time, nice, and make sure the water's going to be warm and all of our accessories that we need and body lotion and all that. And I could dance with her all the way into the shower. And she enjoyed that so much. and it made it all a pleasurable experience. I know, boy, when I was taking care of my mother-in-law in home environment, and she was one that was very difficult, and music helped that so much. It can help in so many ways to set the mood for the morning at breakfast, or if at lunchtime or at dinner, or to close out an evening. We see all different genres of music. We find that a lot of our residents love hymns, and being able to sing old hymns. It's amazing what they carry in their past as far as music and how it sits in the brain. We use it in hospice care as we see our residents through the end of life, and how soothing that could be. Maybe it meets their spiritual needs. Maybe it meets their needs to have rhythm in life, and dancing is certainly a part of that. But it really sets a tone. And when we can get to know our residents' favorite types of music, I have even experienced, and you may have seen this, there is a wonderful movie out there on different streaming services called Alive Inside. And being able to take music and songs that that resident knew before, or your loved one has sung before, and play it, and then see them if they're nonverbal and being able to become verbal again by singing a song. I saw it with a resident a few years ago with Que Sera, Sera, and she had been nonverbal for so long, but playing that song over and over and having other residents singing around her, she started to sing along with us. And it was such a beautiful moment for all of us and her family, her friends. And oh, we just can't say enough about what music does. And each of us have our own favorite songs and favorite music that affects us. It brings back certain memories in life. Maybe when you went to prom or on a first date, or maybe, when you had a child or whatever, and a song that you sang along with them as they were growing up. So can't say enough about the importance of music. I love this quote that David likes to use by Oliver Sacks, and music can lift us out of depression or move us to tears. It is a remedy, a tonic, orange juice for the ear. But for many of my neurological patients, music is even more. It can provide access even when no medication, to movement, to speech, or to life. And I just think that's just a beautiful quote. It really sets the tone for what music does for all of us. Thanks, David. And then art and collage. We really utilize different types of art and different types of textures in art. And we find that collage is such an important part of that. I was just on my monthly call with my expressions directors, and we were chatting about collage. And with the 4th of July coming up, a lot of our communities have leftover puzzles without all the pieces. And one of the things that we did a few years back was we painted our puzzle pieces in red, white, and blue. And then we built our own flag. So it was a collage flag out of all these painted puzzle pieces. It was so beautiful and artistic, but taking different mediums and gluing them on a surface, and it can be with a theme, it can be with a different color, it can be all about birds. I did one a few years back. I am a baker, I love that, and I took the labels off my baking products and made a collage out of that. So finding ways that we discover art. Even our Link Senior has some really beautiful, we see a lot of people doing paint and sips these days. We like to do those as well with little easels and canvases in our communities. And so being able to use art in different ways. And you may have a loved one who is really good at art in a specific way, and they can teach others. Maybe your mom was a watercolor painter, and she can sit down with the kids or the grandkids and show them the strokes and how she would paint. And involving them in art is such an important part of what we do. Thanks, David. And at a virtual museum, our Link Senior tablets also, we can hook those into the big screen, and we can visit museums through virtual events, art galleries, zoos, different types of concerts, all of that. Art encompasses so many different areas. There's a group down in Vancouver, Washington, and Portland area that actually do an auction every year for art that's done by people with dementia and Alzheimer's. And that art is auctioned off, and all that money goes towards the Alzheimer's Association every year. And it's such a way to really showcase what our residents can do. And anytime that we can showcase and compliment them on the art that they do is very important. David.
Well, thank you, Angie. Those were a lot of good ideas, and I particularly love the Mona Lisa. So that's a great way to kind of transition to our final part of the webinar tonight. for today. Basically, I wanted to just say a word about dementia-related behavior. We've talked a lot about this in past webinars, but we've covered the fact that remember that sudden change suggests a person is ill or in pain versus the worsening of the symptoms of dementia. Be sure to look for triggers and causes. They can include time of day, activities before the behavior, an overly aggressive request or approach. Perhaps we are trying to get them to do something they don't want to do. And people with dementia are just like the rest of us. Sometimes if we push them too hard, they push back. When behavior does happen, it can be hurtful. It can be so challenging, but try not to take it personally. I always like to say it's the disease, not the person. And if you lived in a world where you didn't always know what was going on, where you were having some challenges, where you were frustrated, maybe upset or angry, you might not be at your best or lash out to a caregiver as well. When behavior does happen, sometimes you can kind of change the subject, change the scenery, redirect with some favorite activities, music, food, or conversation based on a life story. And again, we aren't going heavily into this topic today because we've covered this in other webinars, but I do recommend the Alzheimer's Association website. They have some great handouts about various behaviors. They have a 24-hour 800 phone number you can call for help. And of course, if you are having some challenges, we hope that our expertise at Prestige can help you. So we're always willing to talk to families. Angie and I do that all the time. We can talk to you or talk to your family if you have any questions and give you some ideas. So again, as we wind down, I guess we're kind of covering the waterfront here today in this summer day. But I did want to just say that certainly we've talked a lot about people living with dementia in this series of workshops and webinars. But remember that you are also very much part of this picture. And there's that old kind of saying, if the oxygen masks deploy on an airplane, be sure to put yours on first and then put your dependents on second. Because if you can't breathe, you can't help anybody else. So, do keep that in mind that, this disease can go on a long time. It's emotionally, financially, physically stressful. So if you are a caregiver, do try to, come up with some strategies and ideas to help yourself really do the best you can. And so number one is really learn all you can. I think the more you know about dementia, the easier your job becomes. So thank you for being part of this workshop. Don't wait to utilize services. Sometimes the best caregivers feel they can do it all themselves and they might implode eventually. So again, do find out if there's a great day program in your neighborhood, engage in-home services for, 4 hours or 8 hours a week. Even if you think assisted living may not be quite for you, visit, make a plan, hopefully visit your local Prestige building, but visit your communities and kind of decide where you might want mom or dad or your husband, wife, or partner to go, because you do not want to have to make a decision in an emergency. So again, make a game plan for the future, including residential care. Consider an in-person or online support group. What I love about support groups, I really started doing support groups at the very earliest years of my career in the 1980s, is, families they can talk turkey to each other. They can say things to each other that families can't, that professionals often can't say. So I find that if you can get a good support group going, not only do you have camaraderie, you have good education, but there's a lot of mutual support and information. And of course, again, the Alzheimer's Association is there for you. Or in some cases, you might have a university Alzheimer's Research Center near you or other Alzheimer's or senior organization. There are a lot of good services out there as well. So again, we're here to help. A couple websites here, prestigecare.com. My own professional website is bestfriendsapproach.com. If you are on Facebook, you can type in the words Best Friends Approach and like it. We're going to be doing some celebrations of my dear friend Virginia Bell, my longtime writing partner's 100th birthday coming up next week. So that'll be fun for you. And then again, pretty easy emails to remember, angie.frantz@prestigecare.com, Frantz, and I'm davidtroxel@gmail.com. So again, thank you very much for being part of our webinar. I think we've got 8 or 10 minutes or so and to do some discussions or questions. I'll kind of go off the main platform. And if you do have questions, Angie, can they hold down their space bar and go off mute, or would you rather they just type them in the chat room?
If they could type it in the chat room, that would be really helpful.
Okay.
Or in the Q&A. Also, I do want to say I had a question that came in through an email of someone that wasn't able to attend today. She had a question about how do I address moving to a community with my mom? She's really exhausted. She's having to use a baby monitor at night to keep an eye on her mom, and it's just been really exhausting and taxing for her. And she does still have teenagers in the home, and I really encourage her to partner with the physician. I think sometimes it's easy for us to be looked at as the bad guy when we're trying to help make these decisions. And so I really encouraged her to really connect with her mom's physician, allow him to take that place. We hear about sometimes having to remove the car keys from mom and dad or something like that. But if you can connect with the physician and have them help you explain the reasoning behind it, and they may still not understand, but having them help out in any way to say, sometimes when a physician says, I really recommend this, they hear it more than if our kids say it to us. So I really ask that, you think about partnering with them, talk to them outside of that appointment with your loved one, and, probably pass them a note before you go in or have a conversation with them on the phone prior to, but really utilize other resources.
Thank you, Angie. I'm typing into the chat room right now, if I can get my spelling right. There's a very good book that I like by Lori White and Beth Spencer. Good grief.
And we do have a question too about sundowning, David.
Okay.
Can you comment on sundowning?
Sure. Let me just finish this one reference here. Sorry about that. Yeah, Moving a Relative with Memory Loss, available on Amazon. Lori White and Beth Spencer is a very good book about kind of how to make that move happen as well. So the next question, about sundowning. Sundowning, or kind of these late afternoon behaviors, is a very old concept in memory care. And what happens is late in the day, often somebody with memory loss begins to have some agitation or begins to feel kind of, uneasy. And there are people who've written about this, like that somehow it has to do with the movement of the sun and the earth and the planets. I tend to think, honestly, that they just get fatigued. Living with Alzheimer's, everything is so much harder. You're trying to figure out your where you are and what's happening around you. So I think that fatigue sets in. But anyway, with this sort of late afternoon agitation or sundowning, a couple ideas I have is build in an afternoon ritual, a little afternoon tea party, a walk, an ice cream cone, some music. Of course, a nice little lay down, a little nap can be very good too. But, try to build something in, try to kind of reduce the stimulation, music, maybe play mother's favorite classical music or spiritual music. And sometimes if you kind of create a little anchor or tradition or ritual, like Angie had afternoon tea in England, that can be very helpful for sundowning.
Yeah. We have another question as well, David. How do you convince someone with Alzheimer's to move into a residential community who is currently living alone and refuses to move?
Okay, well, let me give you my take on it, and Angie, you can comment too. So, sometimes when I have a problem like this, because everybody's different, it's obvious there's not necessarily a one-size-all answer, but sometimes I'll say to myself, David, what won't work? What won't work? In this case, I would say it won't work to argue, to put a PowerPoint together, to, go facts and figures. I think that what probably has a better chance of working is to make more of an emotional appeal. Mom, there's this beautiful community we've discovered. You deserve it. It's going to be lovely. You get all these great meals. There's unlimited ice cream. We want you to be safe. We would feel so much better. Sometimes that kind of emotional appeal can work. Getting another kind of third-party person, like, pardon me, your family lawyer or your clergy member or priest or rabbi, sometimes an outside party making the recommendation, or even the physician. Mom, the doctor feels you cannot live alone at this point. We have to pay attention to what the physician who you trust says. What you want to do is pivot and try not to become the bad guy yourself. So my final recommendation along this line is simply that if your family member is still legally competent, refusing to move, well, sometimes you just have to wait it out, hope for the best, hope that no disaster happens, but there will be an inevitable crisis. There'll be an inevitable time if someone's living by themselves. And so if you have a game plan that maybe something happens, mom has a minor car crash, mom has a fall, there's a flood in the house, you want to be prepared to make that move into memory care on the spot and not look back. And if you could take advantage of those little windows, that could be very helpful. Angie, I know our time's getting short, but do you have a quick comment, or did that cover the waterfront enough for you on that?
And I think also finding a local community that you're looking at and seeing if your loved one can attend certain activities in that community, to get them acclimated, to socialize, to maybe make some
Excellent.
friends there. I know we also provide what we do is Ageless Grace exercise. It's a seated exercise with 21 different exercises. And so we, do classes on that, and you're more than welcome to come into one of our communities and, talk with the community ahead of time and say, I really want my mom to participate in this, or, maybe they have a craft class or something like that, or a live entertainment. All of those things are great ways to draw in your loved one to that community. We do have another question. What are options for physical exercise that my loved one with Alzheimer's can do? And I think anytime we make sure that they are safe in the exercise that they're doing. So like our Ageless Grace, those seated exercises are very beneficial. And there are lots of YouTube exercises available. You can also on Amazon and so forth, or in sporting stores, get those stretchy bands. Those are always wonderful to do stretches to keep those muscles active. So we like those kinds of exercises as well, and just getting them out and walking. The longer that they can keep moving, as they move it or lose it, keep walking, I think is so important as well.
Thank you, Angie. I see a couple other quick questions. My wife sleeps about 20 to 22 hours a day. Is that normal? Wow. Well, that's a lot. I would say it's probably not typical. And so there are two thoughts I have. Certainly talk to your physician. There could be depression, major depression involved. It might also be that your wife is kind of in that sort of tail end of the journey, because toward late stage dementia, people often really are sleeping a lot. So you might, sir, go ahead and talk to your local hospice provider, see if they can maybe give you some support or do an evaluation, but certainly talk to your physician. I'm always afraid to say that something isn't normal because everybody's a bit different, but I would say that that is not typical. How do we deal with sadness and loneliness as a caregiver? Well, first of all, thank you for being part of this group here. It's very tough. I, a couple of years ago, visited a very prominent family actually in England. And even this family that had 1 million friends, the wife said to me, David, our friends have fallen away. No one calls. They don't come and visit. They seem to be afraid of Alzheimer's. And I hope that is changing, but I think that is still sometimes very much true. So I guess what I'd say is, do your best to imagine that life after caregiving, because at some point, presumably you may not be so hands-on. Maybe your family member will pass away or go to assisted living. I would say, reconnect on the internet with friends, join social media, even if that's something really alien to you, because that's a nice way to keep in touch. Reach out to friends, invite them to coffee or tea, say, hey, can you come for an hour? I'd love to see you. My husband's resting in the afternoon. All of that. I think a support group can, again, be invaluable for you online or in person as a way of connecting. And I will say that if you truly feel like you're kind of trapped in your situation, that's when I think it's important to maybe consider services like residential care or even a respite break to give yourself a couple of weeks off. And, Prestige often will take someone for 2 to 4 weeks as a respite break. Because I think if you're really feeling that so profoundly, you want to try to do your best to take care of you whenever you can, to put that oxygen mask on. I know, Angie, if you have any other wisdom to share.
Well, I think the residents are a really great option, and many of our communities at Prestige do that. If you're going to go on a trip, or if you just need a break, and moving them into one of our communities for 2 to 4 weeks is a wonderful thing to do, to give yourself a little respite. I will say many times we'll find that the residents really acclimate very well, and family members will see that and say, maybe this isn't such a bad idea for my loved one to make that final move into this community. They formed relationships, and that's always a great benefit that sometimes is very unexpected. But a lot of them also do go back home after a vacation or something like that, and then we just want to provide the service that the family needs at the time. And we meet with a lot of families that we work through the process for maybe even up to a year or 2 years, but we want to stay connected to make sure that we provide resources before you've actually made that final decision, like these webinars that we provide. And we do have one coming up next month on the brain and body connection with Dr. Rob Winningham. So we invite you to go to prestigecare.com and sign up for that. And then we have one on mental health coming up in August. So finding resources online, I mean, the pandemic was very hard, but certainly there's been a lot of value in what we have with these webinars like today through Zoom, being able to share content and, show our empathy towards what everybody's going through. We've all gone through so many different things in our relationships and our families. And so if we can be there for you and call our communities, we're there to answer questions. That's what we're here for. And if you need a question answered about how to do an activity with your loved one, we'll answer that too, give you some ideas. But just know that we're here to help. Our mission is to personally touch lives every day, and that can be inside our communities or outside. Yeah. Well, David, I'm so grateful for you being with us today. Your insight is priceless. We always enjoy it. We always enjoy your spirit and desire to make things better, bring more joy to the life of those that have been diagnosed with dementia or Alzheimer's. Hats off to you, my friend, and thank you again. So helpful.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, David.
Again, we're delighted to talk to any of you individually, offline, or on the phone or whatever. But certainly your local Prestige community is there for you. Again, blessings, and thank you all for being with us.
Yes, thank you for coming.
Bye-bye.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.